spotlight. Apologies about that. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that probably lots of your operational DSLs have been doing since probably about June, but something that if you haven't started, now is a really good time to get on with it. And that is reviewing your practices, your processes, your policies ahead of the start of the academic year in September. And if you're watching this and you work in an apprenticeship provision that works 12 months of the year and has rolling onboarding, this still counts for you. This is still relevant to you. August is usually a fairly quiet month. Lots of people on holiday, children off school, so lots of parenting responsibilities are around juggling things. And it being quiet actually gives you some space and some headspace often to have a look at the processes and practices that you have been and had in place over the last 12 months to see whether or not they're still relevant, to see whether or not they are still working. Now, you will have to do a review to make sure they comply with legislative changes. We've had some biggies over the last few months, and we've also had a very big review of keeping children safe in education, as well as working together to safeguard children earlier on in 2026. So some big legal changes that will need to be reviewed. But I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking about those policies and procedures where they may overlap, where you can have things like a behaviour policy and a drug misuse or substance misuse policy. Do they say the same thing? Are the consequences similar or the same? Things like your estates and security work. Do they work cohesively, or are they actually competing against each other? Or do they just have two different routes to things, not just because there are two different sections of the organisation they need to go to, but because that's just the way it's always been. So is it easy? Is it simple? Does it work? And you can be really critical about whether or not these things work. Now, I don't mean this is rubbish, but I mean in terms of some real critical thinking around whether what you've got in place is actually still fit for purpose. Does it still work? If you think about the things you've got coming up in August, you might have rolling onboarding. Do you get a chance to review your onboarding processes? Do they still really work? Are you asking the right sort of questions as part of that onboarding process? Yes, you will have set questions that you need to ask, but are there other things that you could ask that will help you be proactive about your safeguarding in the coming 12 months? Are there things that will help you be proactive about support for students and learners? Are there things that help you be proactive to support staff with some emerging issues that might be happening either for your institution, possibly for maybe only one or two business units, or maybe there's something locally that's happening that is going to have a potential impact for staff and students in the coming months. And that could be something as simple as a change to transport links. So by way of example, I was delivering some training for a university over in Manchester, and it turns out that Manchester City Council and Transport for Manchester, I think, had just decided they were going to close the tram system for several weeks, which meant graduations were affected. It meant getting to and from the various campuses across the city were affected. It affected people getting into work. It potentially affected students taking exams. So that wasn't a university or a business decision for the education sector, but they were absolutely impacted by it because it had a absolute direct impact on their staff getting to work, on their students getting to lectures, on their learners getting to work, all of those things going on. So what is going on in your wider area that might have an impact for open days? It might have an impact for students coming in to not just for freshers coming in, but for returning students to come in. It might have an impact for parents coming in and getting back out again. It might be that you are in an area where there's a big sporting event going to happen, or where there are major roadworks planned, things like that. And for most students, that won't make a difference. They'll just find a way around it. But for some of your more shy, or those with additional vulnerabilities with a very small v, that might have a huge impact on them. It might really taint the way that their academic year starts. And that could have a recurring challenge, because it might overshadow and become something that they are really conscious of about, well, if that happened, how do I get home? How do people come and see me? Those sorts of things. So when we talk about proactivity, it isn't just about what's going on and reviewing your policies and procedures, but thinking about how do we respond to these wider challenges that we have no control over, but we are aware of. So how are we going to tell our students about this? Are we telling our students about this? How are we going to share this information with those who are starting in September if it's going to directly affect them? How are we going to share this information with perhaps stakeholders who are coming in for events? Maybe you've got summer schools happening, maybe you've got residentials happening, all of those sorts of things. How is that being shared? What is the wider impact on it? Does it mean that you might have students who are having to take more challenging routes home? Maybe there are situations where they're having to get the bus from somewhere that they wouldn't ordinarily do, that could place them in a difficult position. It might be that they're having to completely change their routines. So what does that look like for you? What's the impact? Does it mean that they're not going to be able to attend early doors? All of those sorts of things. And often organisations will tell you this several months in advance. So you've got some time to think about what you can do from a proactive perspective in order to make sure that you've done what you can to assist your staff and learners. That's one area of it. I've talked about the have you got your policies and procedures working in a holistic manner? Have you got your information sharing right? Are those at executive level getting the right information from operational level? And is the executive level sharing the right information up to strategic level, if that's a different level yet again? So does that work? Did that work last time? What does each of the groups need more information for? Do they need it in a better format? Do they need it do they need explainers? Sometimes, and quite often within the higher education sector, those sitting at strategic level don't necessarily have a working operational understanding of the safeguarding practices that are happening. And that's okay as long as the operational do, but maybe the strategic level need the exec to give them a bit more support to understand what the issues are. Are strategic sharing that information? Are exec getting the information they need from operational? The answer is yes, brilliant. But if the answer is, I'm not sure, then you've got some time to really have a look at, well, what is working here? What isn't working here? What might we need to tweak and change so that information is being shared in an appropriate manner, and that the right levels of people are getting the right level of information, so as there is a proper level of assurance around safeguarding practices over the coming 12 months. So those are just a few things that you can be looking at over August, and to start to think about ahead of the new academic year. And if you're rolling, such as an apprenticeship provision, use this enrolment period to really look at what's working, what isn't working, what might we need to tweak and change, what is some really good practice we're seeing, where are we perhaps missing information, and how might we get that information in maybe another format, or do we need to ask better questions from our learners perhaps, or from our operational teams, to understand some of the things that are going on? And are there better questions that need to be asked of our education partners, so that we've got a better understanding of what's being offered and shared? Or do we need to have a better understanding of what support our employers are giving our learners so that we can link in with that and we don't have this dichotomy of two really separate systems where there is real potential for learners to fall through the cracks because one thinks the other is offering that support. So lots of opportunity to really start to think about, if you haven't already, or even if you have, what can be improved on? How can we be proactive this month to make sure that our next enrolment is the best one we've had, we're getting the right information, and we can therefore really start to assure ourselves to a greater or to some extent that our learners and our students are having the safest possible experience whilst they are with your organisation. If you would like some help with this, if you want to have a conversation, then please do get in touch. You can send me an email or send me a LinkedIn message, and I will happily have a conversation with you. And let's make sure you're fully supported throughout August.